Hey, so today is our very much the last lecture for chapter 6 of Bhagavad Gita. We were able to finish it in 21 lectures, which is good, a good rate, I would say. So I wishing everyone a very, very happy Ram Navami. We'll get started. Om. 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 Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Parthaya Pratibodhitam Bhagavatam Narayanena Swayam Vyasena Kratitam Purana Munina Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitam Ritavarshinim Bhagavatim Ashtadashadhyayinim Ambatva Manusantatami Bhagavad Gita Bhavatveshini Namostute Vyasa Vishala Buddhe Pulla Ravindayata Patra Netra Yena Tvaya Bharata Taila Purnaha Prajvalito Jnanamaya Pradipaha Prapanna Parijataya Totra Vetraika Panaye Jnanamudraya Krishnaya Geetam Brutatuhe Namaha Yam Brahma Varunendra Rudra Marutaha Stunvanti Divyaistavaihi Vedai Sagapada Kramopanishadaihi Gayanti Yam Samagaha Dhyana Vastita Tatkatena Manasa Pashyanti Yam Yoginaha Yasyantam Navidhu Sura Suraganaha Devaya Tasmai Namaha Devaya Tasmai Namaha Sarvadharman Parityajya Mamekam Sharanam Braja Aham Tva Sarva Papebhyaha Mokshayishyami Ma Shuchaha. So today we get a chance to review the entire chapter of chapter 6 of Bhagavad Gita. So let's get directly into the summary itself. And after the summary, I think what I would like to do is ask you as to which of the shlokas that you enjoyed the most. And then we'll finish off with chanting the entire chapter 6. Okay, so that's what I planned for today. So we saw that the whole, before getting into chapter 6 itself, let's talk about why we are studying Bhagavad Gita. As we know, Bhagavad Gita is really the manual of life for us. Just like when we buy the Vitamix or anything, it comes with its own manual. So Bhagavad Gita is also a manual which really helps us to shape up this extremely sophisticated instrument like the human life, right? So we saw that in chapter 1, which we are, of course, not going to review it, with chapter 1 kind of set the stage for Bhagavad Gita, where we found that Arjuna, a very confused person, really, in spite of his smartness and intelligence, was facing probably the biggest crisis of his life. So chapter 1 basically just lists out that whole crisis. So we don't have to get into the details of crisis. We have enough crisis in our own life, not crisis, but even small things can become a crisis. So with that in mind, chapter 2, immediately we saw Lord Krishna breaks into the teachings, in a sense, because Arjuna totally surrendered to him. So you saw chapter 2 where he really gives him the highest knowledge. And in a sense, in chapter 2 itself, basically the whole of Bhagavad Gita could have ended. But then I think it was too much for Arjuna to really bear that amount of knowledge, So, which is why we see that in the future chapters, Krishna starts to talk about, and he expands upon the two major concepts that Krishna introduces in chapter 2, which was Karma Yoga, which is a path of action, and also Sankhya Yoga, the path of knowledge. So for the first time, actually, Arjuna is really hearing these words. So for him, just it sounds, I won't say really Greek or Latin or whatever, but it definitely was something which, he wanted a lot of explanation for all of those. And we know that when something is explained to us, it becomes a lot more easy for us to digest, right? So we see chapter 2, Krishna ends the whole chapter of 72 shlokas, by saying that even though I'm telling you about these two paths, Karma Yoga and Sankhya Yoga, guess what, Arjuna? For you, Karma Yoga is the best option. So we see in chapter 3, immediately Arjuna kind of reacts. It's like, wait a minute. Why do you say Karma Yoga is the best thing for me? I can definitely, do even bigger things. So Krishna feels that he has to explain really what Karma Yoga is for him. So we see that, he explains Karma Yoga in absolutely the practical things, practical way. And Arjuna kind of understands it. But then again, at the end of chapter 3, we find that Krishna, leaves him with this idea of, but, there is something called renunciation. Renunciation as, like giving up everything. So obviously, again, Arjuna wants to know more about what is it really this renunciation is. And he feels that he needs to understand more on, Krishna, of course, presents this whole path of renunciation as if it is something that Arjuna won't be able to handle it. But then he doesn't say it, but you can see that, he kind of whets his appetite for really wanting to know what sannyasa yoga and everything. So from there on, chapter 5, leads to more a discussion of this path of renunciation and everything. And the minute renunciation is introduced, we have to really now, Arjuna is now in this mode of, okay, I need to now know how I can get to this renunciation. So Krishna has to necessarily start to tell him about this path of meditation. So he does that very gently. He starts off initially by really explaining what meditation is, what the challenges are and everything. And then finally gets him to the state of really what Vedantic meditation is. And when it comes to that Vedantic meditation, he then, you see that, he tells him ultimately that there is something called devotion. So all the way from explaining renunciation, he takes him all the way up to devotion. So that's where we see the chapter 6. So this is just in a nutshell what we see, from chapter 3, where the path was more subtle, to where, Krishna just tells Arjuna about engaging himself in good actions, to ultimately, introducing the knowledge part of it, and getting into finally in chapter 5, where he discusses knowledge and yoga and everything. So that is the part ultimately which we have gone into. And the chapter 6, when he says that meditation is the way to get to understanding what renunciation and everything is, we have to necessarily start to discuss about the very first 3 verses of chapter 3, where we find that one has to have the prerequisite for meditation. We have to make ourselves eligible for even sitting down for meditation. Like I've always discussed today, meditation is such a huge buzzword, even in the corporate world. And I guess like in places like Japan, where when somebody gets to work immediately, there is some kind of physical exercises that people do before they get into work. So too, in this chapter 6, you see that eligibility is discussed in ways to get to the ultimate state where chapter 6 takes us. Chapter 6, like we said, takes you to really this nirvikalpa samadhi. It takes you to this Brahma Nirvanam. A lot of these words you will see as it is coming along. But that is where this eligibility is taken into account. It is not just even simple sitting down for meditation, but really truly to the highest state. So we saw in verses 1, 2, and 3, Lord Krishna starts to answer Arjuna's question, because in chapter 5, where this karma sannyasa yoga was discussed, where sannyasa means that path of renunciation, you see that here Arjuna is asking the question, then, Krishna, tell me then, really, who is a true sannyasi? Who is a person who can truly practice renunciation? And who is a karma yogi? So here, yogi is a karma yogi. What is really the difference? So there we see in chapters, in shlokas 1 and 2, where you see Krishna is explaining, taking that concept of karma yoga, that, saying that this word, here he says, karyam karma karoti yaha. So that person is a karma yogi. The person who, whatever the duty that person is supposed to do, that person focuses complete attention on that work that needs to be done. So that person is a yogi. And then Krishna is explaining that such a person is a sannyasi also, because in order to perform good karma yoga, one has to be a sannyasi. That is what he's trying to say. And what is sannyasi? Which is a renunciation. And what is renunciation? It is renunciation of the what is in it for me. I have to renounce what is in it for me in order to become a good karma yogi. So that is why he says this as very important, very important, karyam karma karoti yaha. So that itself he calls as renunciation. Then another word which was introduced at that time was the sankalpaha. Our life is really only nothing but this sankalpas. And sankalpa, the way he had introduced the word here, is where my mind is constantly wanting to satisfy its own imaginations of what gives me happiness. That is sankalpa, So small things. I make a sankalpa, for example, to, maybe as simple as going to Costco to get something which is, not something which I really want, but, let me just go and see what Costco has something new to offer. Now it is springtime, spring, there's going to be some new offerings. Maybe the old products are taken off the shelves. Let me go and see. So that is kind of a sankalpa, a fanciful imagination. Sankalpa can be also something which I know I'm not really good at, but I really want to improve myself in an area, because I think that will get me bigger bang for the buck, so to speak, So sankalpa is all those, and that is what he's saying, many times in our own lives, we have to be careful as to what am I really going for? Am I really going for something which is something which is a longing within myself, or am I going something because, it just looks beautiful or nice and let me just get it, So there's a lot of, you see things coming out in many of these things here. So sankalpa, that word sannyas and yoga, he really brought it so beautifully here. Then in shloka number 3, he tries to bring this arurukshuhu and yoga ruda. So it depends upon the level in which we are in. So if I'm at a level where I'm really improving myself, I'm an arurukshu. And he gives this example of the horse, mounting the horse, mounting the horse and having a good ride. That is the example that was given. So many times for us, we are in the level of just mounting the horse. We are working, we're putting a lot of effort in improving ourselves. That is the arurukshuhu. He's saying, so karma yogi is an arurukshuhu, where, karma yogi is the path given to all of us, where through our own duty, what has been given to us, we are improving ourselves. Every action that I'm doing is actually taking that step forward or taking this climbing to the next level. So here he gives that distinction for somebody who is climbing. Action is supposed to be the means, but for somebody who is already there, inaction is supposed to be the means. Inaction indicating that total, absolute quietude. So shama karana uchate. So that was given here. So that was the 3 verses connected with eligibility for meditation. Now coming to qualities for eligibility. What are the qualities that I need to have? So there are about 6 verses where he discusses about how the different qualities that is required. Some very powerful in this section. This aspect of some very nice verses are coming up, that Uddaredatmanatmanam, those verses are here. So he gives the 6 verses. The mind is a friend and enemy. And, as kind of going through, some of these are kind of milestones where we want to achieve. And finally, getting to the state of that, one is Aruruksho and the Yoga Ruda. So from Arurukshuhu, the one who's climbing, to this one, what is the steps? So that was given here. And here, he gives this, I've just taken a few shlokas here and there to give you that flavor. So here he says, basically there are 3 milestones he gives you. One is, am I really attached to yadahi indriyartheshu? How is my attachment? So how is my attachment to sense objects? Kind of questions or milestone we need to ask ourselves, am I really attached to sense objects? Am I attached to action? Is in every action, am I doing things which is only satisfying my ego? So is the ego really in the driving seat, so to speak? So then that is the other second thing, karmasu part of it. Then am I really free of all expectations for my fruits of actions? All that will really establish this aspect of climbing high, So from there on, now we see this shloka 5, which you can always, if you remember 6.5, 6.5, Uddare datmanatmanam atmanam avasadyet, atmaiva atmano bandhuhu, bandhuratmaiva ripuratmanaha. You can see the word atma, the same word keeps repeating, but in 7 different ways, it means different things, by the mind, atmanam, jiva. So again, your Sanskrit can be practiced here on how the various vibhaktis have been used in the see, by, of, all that is shown here. So basically trying to say that, we talked about the word sankalpa. So when my mind is full of desires, ultimately it is that same desires that is pulling me down. So who can pull myself up? Again, it is me, myself. But how can I do that is where this concept of the lower mind and the higher mind comes. Like even within myself, I have one part which is pulling me down, and I have this other part which is pulling me up. So how do I balance both of them, and how do I pull my own self up from my lower mind to higher mind? So this aspect was beautifully brought out, that the same jiva, this is each one of us, we have the lower mind and the higher mind. And in every choice that I make, I have this ability to, pull myself up. Even like, for example, I went to Chennai last week, and every time when I go from here to Chennai, then, I find that in my mind, I'm a little more clearer, I think it's just one place to another place. So when I went there, I told myself, okay, maybe I'll have my coffee without sugar. So the sensuality, senses, I'm trying to control my senses. So I practiced that, and then I come back here. For 2 days, it worked. The third day, I allowed my mind to just slip. That's it. I started putting, sugar in my tea here. So point is, am I pulling myself up or pulling myself down? So the mind is so very fickle-minded, It really, really needs to, we have to give ourselves time for the mind, actually, to rest on the fact that it is, I myself can pull myself up, and I myself am the one who can pull myself down. So that's where the bandhuhu word comes, the mind is a friend of oneself. But if my mind is not conquered, obviously in my mind, I've not conquered my mind, because immediately as soon as I came back here, I know we may say that, yeah, well, you're in an ashram setting, you should be able to do that, right? So, but again, it's my own mind that is playing with me. That is why mind is a good slave, but a bad master. Go ahead with Neeta.
Though you said the mind should play a role in pulling ourselves up from the lower level up, but isn't it driven by vasana? Though we want to pull ourselves up, won't vasanas play a role in pulling it down also?
It is very, very much. In fact, that component, if you look at, we have this, we have, what should I say? So mind, we say, is a vehicle through which we are transacting in the world, right? The mind has the capability of being influenced a lot by the vasanas. The higher mind, so the lower mind and the higher mind. The higher mind, we call it as the intellect. The intellect has the capacity to be less influenced by the vasanas. So whenever my mind is slipping, it is obviously under strong influence of the vasanas. But if I allow myself, if I give myself enough time for meditation, when I give myself enough time for relaxation of the mind, then what happens is that same mind allows me to make the right decision of understanding that it's only my vasana that is putting me down. I need to rise above the vasana. So,
is that possible?
100%, 100. That's totally, like I said, the only way to do it is three things, which is, first of all, giving that mind enough space to relax, So at the absolutely lowest level, first is not to be involved with too many activities. Just taking one or two or three, whatever I can allow myself, and giving that mind, when we started this session, Madhuri was saying it's busy, 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 so I said, how is everything going? She said, it's very busy. It's now one would think that, for all of us and the stage that we are in, right? Our life is over. We should be able to totally relax ourselves. But that is the first step, really understanding my priority and relaxing my mind. Then putting the, this example, I remember this professor with the jar. I think many of you know this example, right? um, in the jar, this professor tells the student, he shows them big rocks, then he shows them small pebbles, and then he gives them sand. And he tells the student, how will you fill this up? So different, the students, they fill it up in different ways. Somebody puts all the sand, and then he puts the stones, and then he puts the big pebbles, big rocks. Another person puts the rocks in this one. So there are different ways. And then later on, the professor explains through that example of that rock and this, saying that, how you first take this jar, you fill up, first put all the big rocks in. Then you start with the small stones, and then finally fill the sand. So, but we spread ourselves thin, and the idea being that the rocks stands for the big priorities, the huge ones, which is in front of us. And if I do that, and that takes away my time, then there is no time and place for all the smaller things. What do? We don't really spend our time thinking what my priority is. So anything that comes, we just jump into it and we keep doing it, then we get exhausted, right? So the vasanas actually represents all those small things which pulls my mind away and prevents me from the bigger vasana. So even that aspect of getting from tamasic to sattvic is still a vasana, but that vasana is a much better vasana for us. So the big rocks are the sattvic vasanas, which I need to first fill up my mind. And then, the rocks, the pebbles represent the rajasic, and finally the sand represents the tamasic, if you want, vasanas. So that example can be now taken into our own sattvic, rajasic, tamasic thing and doing it. So then this shloka 7, which came about, which talks about the victory over the mind. Jitatmanaha prashantasya paramatma samahitaha shitoshna sukhadukeshu tatha manapa manayoho. So basically, again, trying to show that the mind does go towards first the comfort. The cold and heat refers to the comfort. Pleasure and pain refers to all those small things where I get my pleasure. It goes there, and then also the honor and dishonor. 3 things. So when I'm able to focus my mind on the most important things, I can actually conquer the mind, which can lead to that prashantam, the peace, and which is nothing but that state of the highest peace. So very nice shloka to think about. And then here, the only thing what he wants to refer to here is giving an idea of what is knowledge and what is wisdom. So basically trying to show that, these 2 verses, basically the one who is yoga yukta is a person who has equipoise and knowledge, who's satisfied with knowledge and who remains unchanging. Kutastaha, this word kutastaha, we talked a lot. Kutastaha means someone who remains unchanging, that anvil on which that hammer is done. Whatever happens, that kutastha remains completely stable. So idea through that example, we can visualize how. Then another example that was given about, really, you had 9 types of people. And in the midst of all this, you're still very, some Amlan has put that Pebble story YouTube link, by the way. Thanks, Amlan. It's a very beautiful story, which you can read it at your leisure and see it in the YouTube. So Sukhran Mitra, in the midst of whether somebody is a friend, somebody is an office colleague, here, your colleagues at office, especially, I think, there's a big difference sometimes I find in India versus US also. In US, everyone is hi, you say hi to everyone, right? But who is your true friend, So that's why he says, in the good-hearted, in the friends, in the enemy, the indifferent, we went through this 9, how equal-minded are you? So this is the second section. So first section was eligibility of meditation, there was some, then second one was the qualities of the meditator, how the meditator has to be. So you see how much of thought and effort has gone into all these things, the prerequisites, before one gets into meditation. I feel that even just this 9 verses, if you can practice it, it takes you, you don't have to sit for meditation every day. This itself gives you so much amount of thing to work upon us, So then next section, which is about almost 7 verses, we come to discussing about the details on entering into meditation. Okay, assuming that we have finished, we have all the qualities, we have worked on it. Now I am going to sit for meditation. What should I do at that point? So here now 7 verses or 8 verses were given. The 8 verses, he starts to discuss about how should your mental and physical self be? How should the seat of your meditation? So much of details that goes in, whether you're sitting on a chair or you're sitting on the ground. And here I have to sit on a chair because again, this place you can have cockroaches or lizards and all that going around. So you can imagine for meditation, that will be definitely a big obstacle. So and then you have to prepare the mind. At that point, I cannot say that, what jitat mana prashantasya, Yes, that's a great quality, but I can still be disturbed if I sit on the ground. So then preparing the mind and senses, and then how do I hold my body? How do I, that higher mind we talked about, how can that higher mind be determined? Then how do I, even food and sleep, literally every aspect of what I should be taking care of is given in this section, So again, very practical shlokas. If you want to, at any point in time, really know, okay, I'm really interested in meditation. Somebody, maybe it's a party talk. Somebody says, are you really meditating? No, I'm not meditating. Why? Because I haven't, these are the things that needs to be, you can quote from these verses, go to chapter 6, 10 to 17, and it'll be a great topic for, I think, a party talk. So just one shloka which caught my attention in this one is, as much as, of course, the sleep and everything which is there, but here the very first one talks about the environment, how we need to maintain, rahasi stitaha, how I have to do it myself. I have to do it ekaki, practicing being myself and limiting my mental and physical activities, which is what yata chitta atma, which chitta here referring to the body, and nirashihi aparigraha, free from anxiety and free from greed. So again, as we grow older, sometimes many people say that, everything is going good, but guess what, I really, if I don't worry about something, then what am I living this life for, So people like being worried, people like being anxious, because they feel that at least that way the mind is kept occupied. But this shlokas really goes deeper into some of these aspects. And then shlokas 18 to 23, having now discussed about this aspects of maintaining the environment and how I should do that, you really, the 18 to 23 beautifully goes into what kind of meditation you can get into, so very, very beautiful verses where he talked that one, the lamp, he discusses beautiful example of this flame, how this flame is totally not flickering at all. It's just so so still. A very beautiful example that you can think of. So that is how our mind has to be, where a mind is totally free of thoughts. There is no anxiety, no nothing. Just like that, that particular flame, that's how my mind has to be. So, like in Shloka 18, Yada Viniyatam Chittam, Atmani Eva Avatishtate, Nispraha Sarva Kamebhya Yukta Iti Uchyate Tada. Then it is said to be harmonized. So that state of meditation is that state of total peace. So once we finish that shlokas 18 to 23, then how do I progress in my meditation? What do I need to do? So that was discussed. And here it is again, you're climbing up the ladder, that Arurukshuhu is trying to become Yoga Ruda, getting to that state of enjoying that ride, enjoying that state. So for that one, we discussed about Vairagya, Vairagya being that dispassion. And then continuously practicing that Vairagya as a sadhana. So in order for us to having tasted that Nirvikalpa Samadhi, for me to continuously be there, I have to continuously start to work on this aspect of dispassion. So those part of it was discussed from 24. And then when we chant the shlokas, I want you to bring these thoughts, so that's why I'm not going through every shloka. I just picked a few shlokas here and there to give that. And then the palas, the fruit of Nirvikalpa, fruit indicating what finally, what was the goal that I achieved. So those were talked about. Sankalpa Prabhavan Kaman, Tyaktva Sarvan Asheshataha, Manasaivedriya Gramam, Viniyamya Samantataha. So this is how I'm continuously being in that state of samadhi or meditation. And so the beautiful thing that we get out of this one is, as I practice this meditation, I now become more and more, so to speak, evolved, in the sense my intellect becomes sharper and sharper. And it allows me to make better and better decisions, even in regular life. But more importantly is my intellect now is thirsting for understanding more and more about who really am I, So as I said earlier, chapter 6 is about truly understand who I am. So that that becomes clearer and clearer. So in this section, we talked about Vairagya. So when I have that Vairagya, then I slowly, it dilutes my ego. And when the dilution of ego happens, that leads to truly understanding what my role is in the whole universe. And when I understand how I'm connected to every being, that aspect of love automatically comes. And when I have that love, that is nothing but that absolute state of peace. And that identification with that universal consciousness becomes better and better. And that is the ultimate state of happiness or supreme bliss, as we talked about. So a beautiful set of evolution is what we see in the shlokas in this particular section here. And once I do that, then this supreme bliss, is really translating itself to really understanding what that state of godhood really means. What is that exactly? As I said earlier, we talked about Tvampada meaning that who am I, right? So in the beginning, I have a very strong sense of an ego that this is Sunitha, she's the one doing this, she's the thing going towards. But slowly and slowly, from this previous slide that I showed, slowly and slowly, as I practice karma yoga, without looking for anything or what is in it for me, I slowly and slowly, my ego gets diluted and diluted. And truly, I understand that finite nature is not really finite, it is an infinite part of it. So the Tvampada becomes more and more easier to understand. And only when I understand myself as not this finite self, only then can I really understand the Godhood, like when I, in this shloka here, when I say Brahman is that supreme bliss, it is still very hard for me to understand this if I don't go through these steps. So that is why this is an important aspect to recognize that. And so the next 4 shlokas, we really understand from this individual self, how I'm able to recognize my bigger, higher self in the sense of in my relation to the whole universe. And ultimately, where Krishna then explains to Arjuna, once I reach that state, how the yogi, the karma yogi, and that ultimate state is nothing but one. So 31 shloka, the shloka number 31 talks about it. And in 32, then Krishna talks about then who is the highest yogi, who among the yogis can be the highest yogi. So after Krishna, has explained all this to Arjuna, then you see Arjuna, wakes up a little bit. He's like, okay, wait a minute. All this sounds great, but do you really honestly think that I can actually go there? Arjuna is like, I'm sorry, this is really not for me, because look at the honesty, he's really asking the questions. It's, as much as we say chapter 6 is about meditation, you can see that it is at a very high level of meditation. So, he comes with these shlokas, Chanchalam hi mana Krishna pramati balava. He says, my mind is really too strong. I cannot do this. It's really impossible. So he brings these shlokas, and then Krishna explains, yes, I agree with you. It is really, really strong, but ultimately, practice, practice, practice. That's the only way that it's going to happen. So start today, start in a small way, whatever amount that you can give to your own self. There's nobody who can help you. You're the only one who can help yourself. You, of course, need a teacher. You need someone who can help you, be the buddy, all that. So he says that, and he gives this confidence for him, saying that, yes, it is possible for you to go there, but I also want to warn you. He says, it is very hard to attain if you don't control your mind. So that is where he shows this. And then you see Arjuna then coming back, and after Krishna explains this, Arjuna then has these questions about, tell me, what about this? Okay, assuming that I'm putting the effort today, okay, tell me, Krishna, will I lose all this credit that I have gained so far? Like the Silicon Valley, which has gone bust right now, or, those things. People who have put in that amount of money in there, have they really lost everything? So Krishna is trying to say, no, whatever credit you have earned in this life by doing good, you will definitely achieve the goal in different ways. So then, he gives, so that person who probably did not achieve what he got. So that's what the yoga brashta here is trying to show, That is the person who put all the effort but did not reach his complete final goal. So you see Krishna explaining to Arjuna about, in this next set of shlokas, about how the yoga brashta who's fallen from yoga, and he gives this example of that cloud, which breaks away from the big cloud and then joins another cloud. But we looked at many different examples, and he assures him, saying that even among this yoga brashta, there are two types of people. Number one is he's a karma yogi who has done a lot of work, but he still has a little bit of vasana. Where will he be born? So he says, that person will get a good human birth. But the other person who was already there, but, still had just maybe a little more to go, and that person, somehow his body did not give away. So what about that person? So that's the yogi, the jnani part of it, and how the person will reach that high level. So that's what, and this is just one of those shlokas, Kachino Bhaibhrishtaha, Chinnat Abrahma Ibanashyati, Apratishtu Mahabaho, Vimudo Brahmanapati. So, and then finally, in last two shlokas, he tells, Krishna tells him about, who is among all the yogis, who's the best of the meditators, So he tells him with this, I just put this one thing here, as a ladder of rise, how do we measure our progress? So this part was given in Shloka 46, where he discusses the 4 or 5 different type of yogis. And this is this one here, you start off first by being a karma yogi, where we develop through sadhana chatushtayam, viveka vairagya and the shat sampatti. We do our work, and from here I become this arurukshuhu, and when I'm an arurukshuhu, then that helps me to listen to shastras and do good shravanam. And when I do that, then I start to really inquire. I do the mananam, and finally, when I do this, I reach the state of nididhyasanam, or really truly the Vedantic kind of meditation, I say, the yoga rudra. So this is the climb that was talked about in this whole, it's kind of a summary slide of the whole thing. And so this is, I'll stop here to ask you if you have any questions or anything, and then we will chant the whole shlokas.
Sunitha, well, keep this slide. I have a question.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead. I just want to be, 10 minutes.
Okay, that second one. You said in the beginning that we all stop at Aru Rakshaku level. Is that what you said? We just stop there? Something you told me. I'm trying to understand.
No, we actually, this is just the progress in evolution. We don't stop. We actually stop even below this karma yogi.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is for somebody who is already, chapter 6 really is for somebody who is already convinced about the fact that there are 2 paths called karma yoga and sankhya yoga, and the person wants to now become a better and better karma yogi, for example. So that's where the chapter 6 started. So the person is already a karmi. This is the starting point.
Okay. And then we climb up, we go to the next level. Correct. And then from there to the next level is very difficult. Is that what you were trying to say? Or the second level itself is difficult?
No. From sadhaka to arurukshuhu itself is very difficult.
Okay.
Literally, the first 15 shlokas, the preliminaries and the qualities, they really address this part of it. A person who's a karma yogi, need to have those qualities which is discussed in shlokas 4, 5 to 12 or something, all that. Then when you start to practice the meditation, everything, slowly you get to this Aru Rukshu stage. And when we start to practice that meditation, the way it has been discussed, then our understanding of the knowledge of the Shastras become better. So in one hand, we are now at a stage where we have so many lectures on Vedanta available to us at our, not fingertips, at our screen tip, thousands we can get that. All that is great. But if I'm not at the stage of Karma Yogi, it'll be very hard for me to absorb that knowledge. So that is why the Shravanam means listening through any means. But for that, we need to be this Arurukshu. Then is the step of Mananam, and finally the state of that ultimate state of meditation.
Okay. So even so we need so much of attention even at the Shravanam stage.
100%, absolutely.
So much,
yeah. And you see how it is becoming, right? I don't know what the latest statistics are in terms of attention span. They were saying what 5 minutes is an attention, 5 minutes or less, isn't it?
Yeah, something they were talking about.
And now with this chat GPT and everything, we really have to understand what it means, because everything is available at a fingertip, right? I mean, it's on one hand, it's great that much knowledge is there, which is available for transaction. But as a human being, we are at a different level of operation. I don't know, can Chat GPT allow us to go through this level? If this is the actual progress of success, first of all, we have to define success, and Chat GPT can help us success in the material world beautifully, but it is more and more going to affect our attention span, which will affect this Shravanam itself,
Because all this needs lot of attention and deep thinking, which is lacking in, not that we have, but it's very much lacking in the next generation, very much, because they have everything in the fingertip. They take the phone and look at everything, so they have no thinking. They don't think to get the answers. They immediately look and get the answer.
Correct.
For a short span, it's for a real short span.
Yeah, Google is completely going to be replaced by Chat GPT or Bard, right? They're working on Bard or something right now.
Oh, right, something like that, yes.
Yeah. So.
Very nice. Thank you, Sunitha.
No problem.
Very nice.
Any other thoughts, or was this helpful, this summary of the whole chapter 6?
Definitely.
Yes, very nice. It's very.
Maybe you should stop the recording.
Yeah, actually, I was going to chant, but I'm just thinking with the chanting may take a longer time. Next week, I will chant the whole thing, and then we'll start off with chapter 7, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Let's stop the share. And
I think Amlan sent a story or something.
No, Amlan sent the Pebble story. The Pebble story, he sent the YouTube link.
Okay.
So, Sunitha, are you saying basically everybody is in the first step on the ladder? Is that what you're trying to say?
Yes, that is exactly what I'm trying to say. That part, what I said, Karma Yogi. Who is a Karma Yogi? So maybe let's discuss about that aspect. Who do you think is that first step?
I think Sunitha, still it is recording and live.
Oh yeah, let me stop the recording. And I need to get out of this, stop live stream also. Yeah, and stop the live stream and we can open it up for